Marilyn Monroe, a name that echoes across the ages, synonymous with glamour, beauty, and an aura of mystery. Yet, despite her immense fame, the story of her life is not one of fairy tale perfection. Behind the flashing cameras and public adoration, Monroe's personal struggles were as intense as her on-screen allure. But it was on the night of August 5, 1962, when Marilyn Monroe's life came to a tragic and untimely end, that the real mystery began. How did Marilyn Monroe die? Was it truly a suicide, as the official reports suggest, or was there something far darker lurking behind her death? A web of theories and suspicions has surrounded her demise for decades, from conspiracy theories involving the Kennedy brothers to rumors of a deep-seated cover-up within the Hollywood elite. Monroe's death remains one of the most discussed and debated in history. Before we dive into the details of her tragic end, let me ask you a question. Do you believe the official story, or do you think there's more to it? Drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy this dive into one of Hollywood's most enigmatic figures, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more stories like this. Now, let's take a step back and understand who Marilyn Monroe was before the night that changed everything. Marilyn Monroe was more than just a movie star. She was a cultural phenomenon. Born Norma Jean Mortensen on June 1, 1926 in Los Angeles, California, her early life was anything but glamorous. Raised in foster homes and orphanages, Monroe faced significant challenges from a young age. Her father was absent, and her mother struggled with mental health issues, leaving Marilyn to navigate the world largely on her own. But even in these difficult circumstances, there was an undeniable spark in her that would eventually propel her to global stardom. In her early 20s, Monroe began her career as a model, and it wasn't long before her striking beauty caught the eye of Hollywood. She signed a contract with 20th Century Fox in 1946, but it was her transformation into Marilyn Monroe, both in terms of appearance and persona, that made her a household name. With platinum blonde hair, a curvy figure, and a breathy voice, she captivated audiences in films like The Asphalt Jungle, 1950, and All About Eve, 1950, roles that showcased her early potential as more than just a dumb blonde archetype. But it was her roles in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, 1953, and How to Marry a Millionaire, 1953, that solidified her place as one of the most recognizable stars in the world. Monroe became the epitome of the glamorous, seductive woman, a symbol of both the allure and vulnerability that seemed to radiate from her every appearance on screen. However, the woman who was adored by millions often found herself struggling behind the scenes, battling personal demons that would become increasingly hard to ignore. Her tumultuous love life, including marriages to baseball legend Joe DiMaggio and playwright Arthur Miller, and her battle with mental health and substance abuse, painted a picture of someone who, despite having everything, was deeply unhappy. Hollywood was no stranger to its stars' problems, but Monroe's personal struggles seemed to intensify as her fame grew. These challenges would eventually weigh heavily on her, leaving a permanent mark on both her career and her personal life. As her career continued to rise, so did the pressure to maintain the image that the world had fallen in love with. In her final years, Monroe's mental and physical health began to deteriorate, exacerbated by her constant battle with loneliness, isolation, and public scrutiny. While she was known as a Hollywood goddess behind closed doors, she was a woman in crisis. Yet despite these personal battles, she continued to work, creating what would become some of her most iconic performances. Marilyn Monroe was more than just a tragic figure. She was the embodiment of both the golden age of Hollywood and its darker undercurrents. The pressures of fame had begun to take a toll on her, and as the years passed, it became clear that something was terribly wrong. Little did the world know these struggles would culminate in her untimely and mysterious death, a death that remains a subject of intense speculation and intrigue to this day. But to understand the significance of her passing, we must take a closer look at the fateful night of August 5, 1962. On the evening of August 5, 1962, the world was shocked by the news of Marilyn Monroe's sudden death. She was just 36 years old. Monroe had spent the previous few days at her home in Brentwood, California, isolated and in a state of deep emotional distress. Known for her turbulent relationship with fame, her public image, and her own mental health struggles, it was clear that Monroe had been in a fragile state, yet no one anticipated that her life would come to an end so abruptly and under such mysterious circumstances. On the night of her death, Monroe's housekeeper, Eunice Murray, noticed that Monroe's bedroom light remained on late into the night. Concerned, Murray called Monroe's psychiatrist, Dr. Ralph Greenson, who quickly rushed to her home. Upon arriving, Dr. Greenson reportedly looked through a bedroom window and saw Monroe lying on her bed. He broke the window and entered the room, only to find her unresponsive. Monroe was declared dead at 3:50 a.m. on August 6, 1962. The official cause of death was listed as an overdose of barbiturates. Monroe had a history of substance abuse, and her doctors had prescribed her various medications to manage her depression and anxiety. But even though the coroner ruled her death as a probable suicide, many people believed there was more to the story. The circumstances surrounding her death raised numerous questions. There were no signs of a struggle or evidence of foul play, yet the rapid response and the lack of a full investigation into the details of her death left many suspicious. Why, for instance, had Monroe's housekeeper waited so long to call for help? Why had the scene been handled so quickly? These questions fueled a growing sense that the official narrative didn't quite add up. One of the most curious details about Monroe's death was the timing. It occurred shortly after she had spent time with her close friends, including famed actor Peter Lawford, who was connected to the Kennedy family. Monroe had reportedly been in a relationship with President John F. Kennedy, as well as his brother, Robert F. Kennedy, and their connections to her have fueled one of the most prominent theories surrounding her death, that it was no mere accident or suicide, but something far more sinister. Despite the official ruling, conspiracy theories about her death began to spread almost immediately. The media, fueled by speculation, began exploring the possibility that her death had been orchestrated by someone who had a vested interest in silencing her. But what were the real motives behind Monroe's untimely demise, and why did so many find it hard to believe that she had simply overdosed? To answer these questions, we must delve into the various theories that have surfaced over the years, each attempting to explain how this beloved star's life came to such a tragic and mysterious end. The official story of Marilyn Monroe's death as a probable suicide, due to an overdose of barbiturates, has never fully satisfied many people. Given her high-profile status and the circumstances surrounding her passing, a variety of conspiracy theories have emerged over the years, each more intriguing than the last. Some believe her death was not a suicide at all, but a deliberate act orchestrated by powerful figures with vested interests. Let's explore the most compelling theories that have shaped public opinion about the true cause of her death. Theory 1: Suicide. For many, the most logical explanation for Monroe's death was that it was a suicide. Monroe had struggled with depression, anxiety, and substance abuse for years, and many people close to her believed that she had been on the verge of a breakdown. Monroe's emotional state had been deteriorating, and she had recently been in therapy with Dr. Ralph Greenson, who was deeply involved in her care. The pressure of maintaining her public image while battling personal demons could have become too much to bear. Friends and colleagues of Monroe reported that she was often depressed, feeling isolated, despite being surrounded by fame and luxury. In fact, some say that Monroe had attempted suicide before, which only added weight to the belief that her death was a tragic, inevitable result of her personal struggles. Her deep sense of loneliness and her ongoing difficulties in her personal relationships, including failed marriages and unrequited love, compounded the pressures of her celebrity life. Monroe had been a victim of the intense scrutiny that comes with fame. The world saw her as a dazzling, untouchable star, but behind closed doors, she was a woman in crisis. Her mental health had worsened in the months leading up to her death, and she was known to have been deeply affected by the media and public perception. She had recently been spending more time at home, disconnected from her friends and the outside world. In this light, Monroe's death seemed tragically predictable, a victim of her own fragile state of mind. The overdose of barbiturates found in her system seem to further support the suicide theory. Barbiturates are known to be highly addictive, and Monroe had struggled with them for years. The combination of drugs in her system could easily have led to an accidental overdose, or perhaps a final intentional act to end her suffering. Yet even with the overdose, many people were still unconvinced that this was the complete truth. Theory 2. Murder linked to the Kennedys. One of the most enduring theories surrounding Marilyn Monroe's death is that she was murdered, and that her death was somehow connected to the Kennedy brothers, John F. Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy. This theory has fascinated conspiracy theorists for decades, with some speculating that Monroe was silenced because she knew too much or was about to reveal sensitive information about her relationships with both Kennedys. Monroe's alleged affair with President John F. Kennedy was well known, but what's often overlooked is that she was also rumored to have had an affair with his brother, Robert F. Kennedy. These relationships have long been the subject of gossip, speculation, and suspicion. Some theorists believe that Monroe's romantic entanglements with the powerful Kennedy brothers may have led to her untimely death, as she may have become a liability to the family. The timing of her death added fuel to the fire. Monroe had reportedly been in contact with the Kennedy brothers in the weeks leading up to her death, and some believe that her relationship with them had been causing tensions within the family. It is also believed that Monroe may have been planning to go public with her story, which could have been damaging to the Kennedy legacy. Monroe had a reputation for speaking her mind, and it's possible that, at the time of her death, she was in a position to reveal intimate details about the Kennedys' personal lives, secrets that would have been highly embarrassing if not politically dangerous. But the theory doesn't end with Monroe's relationships with the Kennedys. Some speculate that the Kennedy family or their associates may have orchestrated Monroe's death in order to protect their reputations and avoid any political fallout. The involvement of figures like Robert Kennedy, who was actively involved in politics at the time, has only served to fuel this idea. While there is no concrete evidence to support this theory, it continues to be one of the most discussed and debated aspects of Monroe's death. Theory 3. Hollywood's dark side. Beyond the Kennedys, there is a theory that Monroe's death was the result of the darker forces within Hollywood itself. The idea that Monroe was murdered by powerful figures within the entertainment industry has long been a source of intrigue. This theory suggests that Monroe's increasing desire for control over her career, combined with her defiance against the powerful Hollywood studios, led to her being silenced by those who feared she would expose the corrupt and exploitative practices of the industry. Monroe had a rocky relationship with Hollywood's studio system, which was notorious for controlling its stars. She was constantly manipulated and taken advantage of by producers, agents, and directors, and she became known for pushing back against the demands placed on her. Her increasing frustrations with the system, along with her desire to work on more serious roles rather than just play the dumb blonde archetype, made her a potential threat to the established order. In her later years, Monroe began to distance herself from Hollywood's elite. She started her own production company, which gave her more control over her career, but this was met with resistance from the powers that be. Some theorists argue that Monroe's growing influence, combined with her refusal to play by Hollywood's rules, made her a target. If she had lived, Monroe may have challenged the status quo and exposed the darker side of the entertainment industry, which could have been seen as a threat to the powers in control. Additionally, Monroe's public outbursts and the increasing pressure to keep her image in check may have been too much for Hollywood to handle. In the cutthroat world of show business, stars like Monroe, who were seen as unpredictable or troublesome, often faced harsh consequences. Those who stood to lose the most from Monroe's defiance may have been motivated to take drastic action to ensure her silence. In the aftermath of Marilyn Monroe's death, the investigation into her passing was rushed and filled with inconsistencies, leading to widespread skepticism about the official narrative. While the coroner's office concluded that her death was a probable suicide, the lack of a thorough investigation, coupled with some questionable actions in the hours following her death, raised many doubts. The manner in which the authorities handled Monroe's death contributed significantly to the cloud of mystery that still surrounds the case today. The investigation into Monroe's death began almost immediately. Upon discovering her lifeless body, her psychiatrist, Dr. Ralph Greenson, was the first to arrive at the scene, followed by Monroe's housekeeper, Eunice Murray. Despite the circumstances being suspicious, a woman of Monroe's fame dying, alone in her home with no immediate witnesses, the authorities moved quickly to conclude that there was no foul play involved. The lack of an in-depth investigation into the scene raised many questions. For instance, why was the body removed so quickly? Why was there no immediate search for potential witnesses or further inquiries into her death? One of the most glaring inconsistencies was the speed at which Monroe's body was taken away from the scene. Within hours of her death, the media was already reporting on it, and yet no forensic investigation was conducted to the level one might expect of a high-profile death. The medical examiner's report noted that Monroe had died of a barbiturate overdose, which seemed consistent with her known struggles with drugs and mental health. But this finding was not enough to quell the suspicion that there was more to the story. For many, the lack of a thorough autopsy and the absence of concrete evidence created a sense that the authorities were not entirely transparent. Additionally, there were contradictions in the statements made by those closest to Monroe in the days leading up to her death. Eunice Murray, who had been living with Monroe at the time, stated that she saw Monroe's bedroom light on late into the night and became concerned. However, despite her concern, she waited several hours before calling for help. This delay in seeking assistance seemed odd, especially considering the nature of Monroe's health issues, which had been well known by those closest to her. Why was this delay allowed to occur? Moreover, the presence of Dr. Greenson at the scene was also a subject of scrutiny. Greenson had a deep personal connection with Monroe, and some theorists have suggested that his involvement in the scene of her death may have been more than just a professional act. Some even wondered if he had been a part of a larger cover-up. While there is no definitive proof of this, the lack of a detailed investigation into his role added fuel to the fire of those who believed Monroe's death was not simply a tragic accident. Furthermore, there were reports that Monroe's personal diaries and notes were missing in the days after her death. Given her tumultuous personal life, these diaries might have contained key insights into her emotional state, as well as details about her relationships. The fact that these items disappeared only heightened the suspicion that something more was at play. If Monroe had been planning to reveal something in her private writings, then the absence of this evidence could suggest a deliberate effort to erase any potential clues to the true cause of her death. The official conclusion of suicide may have satisfied some, but for others, it was far too simple an explanation for such a high-profile and enigmatic figure. With the lack of transparency and the contradictory details surrounding the investigation, it was easy for conspiracy theories to take hold. Monroe's death, which initially seemed like a tragic but straightforward case of overdose, became an enduring puzzle that many felt had yet to be fully solved. The public's perception of Monroe's death only deepened the mystery. For years, the investigation remained stagnant, and the case was closed without any further significant findings. As time went on, people began to ask, was the official explanation truly accurate, or was Monroe's death a carefully orchestrated event meant to silence her for good? In the years following her death, Marilyn Monroe's legacy grew exponentially. What had once been a tragic loss for Hollywood turned into a symbol of the vulnerabilities that lay beneath the surface of fame. Monroe's image, both as a glamorous star and a tragic figure, has endured for decades, continuing to captivate audiences around the world. But even more than the persona, it is the mystery surrounding her death that has ensured her place in history. Monroe's passing resonated far beyond Hollywood. For many, she embodied the conflict between public adoration and private despair. Her image, perpetuated through iconic photographs, films, and her unforgettable public appearances, painted a picture of a woman who, despite her beauty and success, could not escape the struggles of her personal life. In death, she became a symbol of both the fragility of the human condition and the harsh realities of the entertainment industry. The mystery of her death only added to the allure surrounding Monroe. From the numerous books and documentaries to the endless speculation and theories, Her passing has remained a subject of fascination for decades. Her story continues to resonate because it speaks to universal themes: the price of fame, the inner turmoil that often accompanies public life, and the haunting question of what truly happened in those final moments of her life. The unanswered questions surrounding her death have kept Monroe's memory alive, ensuring that she is never forgotten. Monroe's death has also had a profound influence on popular culture. Her image has been endlessly replicated and reinterpreted, from the iconic white dress blowing in the wind to her breathy rendition of Happy Birthday for President Kennedy. Artists, musicians, and filmmakers continue to draw inspiration from her legacy, while her name remains synonymous with the contradictions of fame, beauty, and vulnerability. Despite the unanswered questions about how she died, Monroe's legacy remains intact. She has become a cultural touchstone, a symbol of both the heights of stardom and the deep personal struggles that often accompany it. Marilyn Monroe's name will forever be linked to the mystery of her untimely death, and as long as the world continues to ask questions, her story will remain an indelible part of Hollywood's golden age. As we reflect on the life and death of Marilyn Monroe, we are left with more questions than answers. The mystery surrounding her passing continues to intrigue and haunt us, but perhaps that is part of her legacy. Monroe's story is one of both brilliance and tragedy, a stark reminder that even the brightest stars are not immune to the darker forces of the world. While we may never know the full truth of her death, we can continue to appreciate the profound impact she had on Hollywood and on popular culture. Monroe's tragic end reminds us of the pressures of fame, the fragility of the human spirit, and the unanswered questions that linger in the shadows. Whether we view her death as a suicide, a murder, or something more complex, one thing is certain: Marilyn Monroe will never be forgotten. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think really happened to Marilyn Monroe? And if you haven't already, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the mysteries that have shaped our world.